I'm Amy Baez, pediatric occupational therapist and founder of Playapy, and I'm here to provide you with some playful solutions and powerful results. Today, I am so excited. I am back with an interview, and I haven't done one in a while, but I'm really excited about this one. She is the reason why I wanted to bring interviews back. We are talking today about outdoor play and speaking to Laura Park Figueroa. Now, those of us in the OT world know her because she is the founder and CEO of Outdoor Kids OT in California. She is also creator of the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community and the ConTiGO approach, among other things. She also has a great podcast that I listen to all the time. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to have her speak with me today, because I feel like she has so much valuable information to share, not only with nature-based therapists, but also therapists like me and parents at home. So let's get started. Let's welcome Laura Park Figueroa. Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us on the Playapy YouTube channel. We're so excited to
I'm
have you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so we've met before. I
hmm
first started to follow you when you had your Mind Your OT business podcast, which I love the
Uh-huh.
name, and it really caught my eye. And I started following you then. And then I met you personally at the OT Entrepreneur Summit. And
hmm
since then, you have niched down even more specifically to nature-based therapy. So
hmm
I really wanted to talk about outdoor play. And I thought, who better to talk to and interview than you? So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I love to talk about outdoor play. It's my favorite thing. So it's
So
great.
I want to first start there and just kind of differentiate the difference between like outdoor play and indoor play, and maybe some of the quick benefits that you could share.
Yeah, so I think this really is resonating with us as parents and as therapists that children are indoors a lot more than most of us were when we were young. And I think a lot of that is due to the inundation of technology into children's lives. And so a lot of that technology play that they're doing on screens is very sedentary. And so to me,
Mm.
top of mind, the first thing that comes to mind is that when kids get outdoors, they are much more active generally. There's expansive space outdoors for them to move their bodies and to have those sensory motor experiences that kids need in order to have healthy growth and development of their bodies and brains. And so I think that that is probably the first top of mind thing, but there
Yeah.
also is evidence out there that suggests that when kids get outdoors, there's a lot more creative play that goes on. They use their
Mm.
imaginations more, and that they experience kind of a freedom to make choices and do things that they want to do. If you've ever heard, I'm sure you've heard of loose parts play, right? Like where kids play with just a variety of loose parts that don't necessarily have a specific like reason or end for what they're playing with. So
Yeah.
leaves and rocks and sticks and all of these things can become a variety of different items. And so that availability of loose parts in outdoor settings as well contributes to that like creative and kind of exploratory play that kids can do outdoors. So there's just a few of the things top of mind that come to mind when I think about indoor versus outdoor play.
It reminds me, I have this little thing I call my fun box. It's just like fine motor manipulatives,
hmm
but they're like do all these different things, and sometimes they don't know if they go together or not. But I'm like, just do. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, right. Do
So
whatever you want with these things in here.
So I have so many questions, and I don't want to seem too random, but I want to just go back a little bit first
Mhm.
to your start in this process, because in reading about it, I realized that we started becoming a therapist like the same year.
Oh,
And
cool.
at some point, you went off the rails of what's typical and started doing your own thing. And I'm just wondering, what was the thing that kind of sparked that? And what did that look like at the beginning?
Yeah, so I was in a master's program and started finding research about just I had to do my like thesis on something. And I was working in school based at the time and I was like, I can't think about handwriting anymore, you know? So I ended up doing some like a lit review and doing some research on outdoor play and nature-based play. And I dove like deep into the research that is out there on like forest schools and outdoor schools, which many people, if you're watching this and you don't know about it, it is really, if you just Google forest school and see what comes up, you will see that there is this whole movement of an education of getting kids outdoors for their like entire school day, you know? And
Mhm.
so that kind of stimulated my interest. And then I went on to do my PhD and studied nature-based occupational therapy. So I did research on that. So my practice came out of this idea, like as I was learning all of these kind of what was out there in the education world on getting kids outdoors. I was working indoors. I was working in schools and also working like very part-time in a clinic. And I had a couple of kids that I just really wanted to see them outdoors. And so I asked their parents if they would let their kids be guinea pigs so I could do this
Mhm.
outdoor OT group. And I kind of shared this dream I had with them of doing an outdoor OT practice that would be all outdoors. And they were like, "Sure, yeah, go ahead." Like, so my son came and a couple of kids that I was seeing privately, and I did a few groups that way. It went great. It was super fun. The parents loved it. I loved it. I saw the kids do things that I would never have seen them do in a clinic setting, or that would have taken a lot longer to get to. Specifically, the thing I saw right away was tactile defensiveness. Kids that
Mm.
don't like to get dirty or that are really hesitant to touch things or may just be more um, scared when it comes to interacting with different textures, like in the outdoor environment with other kids around. Within one session, they were already showing this ability to adapt to having the mud on their hands or having dirt on
Yeah.
their clothes or whatever that might be. So I did that, and then I decided that I was gonna, like, go all in, and I started Outdoor Kids OT, which is a nature-based pediatric practice in California. And yeah, we just started from there. So I ran a couple of groups my first year, and then I hired employees, and so the business has been going for, I think we're on year 7 now.
Wow.
And so I've kept it really small. I have a few employees, but we specialize in doing these outdoor groups. We also offer individual services, but everything we do is outdoors. And along your theme of play for this podcast YouTube channel, um, you know, I really I really decided to do outdoor groups because of the conviction that I don't think kids are really learning how to play when they're in this isolated kind of setting with just a therapist and the child in a treatment session, right?
Right.
And maybe the parent is there too, but even the parent and the therapist with the child, they're not really learning how to play with their peers. And so to me, that addition of peers being in the session was really key to um, the therapy approach I developed, which is called connection and transformation in the great outdoors. So we ConTiGO for short is how I shorten it. So the ConTiGO approach really grew out of that idea of like taking therapy outdoors being evidence-based based on research that is out there, as well as this need for connection in our sessions with peers or other family members in the session with us. So that's kind of a little bit about how the approach grew out of the work we did at OKOT. So that's kind of how
Yeah.
I got into it. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, no, it's totally okay. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think it's just brave to work in groups because I feel like one
Mhm.
is enough for me to work with.
Yeah,
And even sometimes involving a sibling, I'm like, wait, well, this is like it
yeah,
getting to be a little bit much because then I feel like I don't know who I'm giving therapy to at times,
right, right.
especially if there's someone who doesn't realize that the other one needs therapy too.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, that can
So,
happen.
but I feel like, okay, so that's like, I still feel like that was a huge leap. So for I guess the average therapist, what
Mhm.
could be something small or even parent, like what could be something small that they could do to start to like just kind of put their toe in the water of
Mm.
doing more outdoor play?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that the outdoors is not always the best place for therapy. Okay? So I'm all for kids getting outdoors all the time. Like I think kids in all kinds of weather, I think it's really healthy for us to kind of kick them outside and let them kind of explore and be bored for a little bit and figure out, you know, like what they want to do out there.
Yeah.
But I do think that for therapy, we have to be thinking that's what therapy is, right? We have to be thinking about what is really the best therapeutic environment for this child based on the assessment that we made and the goals that we have for this specific child and family. And so sometimes taking therapy outdoors can be a little bit overwhelming or too much for a child. And so we have to honor that in this process. That
Mhm.
was something in my research. They were like, you're showing your bias, you're showing your bias. When I was writing, I'm like, you're right. So I've learned to really honor that that's part of the therapeutic process, is thinking about where is the best place to provide therapy for this child. Um, Really simple first step, really simple. I mean, like the simplest thing you're going to be like,
Give it to
I
me.
didn't need an expert to tell me this. Like, but putting taking your therapy session near a window when you are indoors.
Oh, okay.
That is like just the very simplest thing. And this is based on Roger Ulrich, his research in 1984. This is like one of the most cited studies. I just mentioned this on my podcast, actually. So I think that's why it's top of mind. But it's called View Through a Window May Improve Surgery Recovery Time, or something similar to that title.
Okay.
And so that he did a study where they had patients in a hospital who were recovering from the same surgery, some by windows, some in a room that did not have windows, and they or a view of a view of sunlight and like outdoors, right? Um, and the people that had the view outdoors recovered more quickly from surgery. So that is
Yeah.
like something that sticks in our mind, right? That like even just having this view, I keep looking this way because I have a window right there, but having this view of the outdoors actually can influence our body's ability to heal. So if you are a therapist who works primarily indoors or who works in schools, and it may not be feasible productivity wise, because a lot of times we have kids like back to back, right?
Right.
It might not be feasible to get them all the way outdoors, but even just moving your work by a window and maybe observing what's outside the window, I think that is a great, like, really simple first step. Um, as far as like baby steps after that, take a session outdoors. And the thing that I think is so important for parents, especially, and also for therapists to remember, is that you don't always have to have an agenda, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't always have to have like, okay, I've planned out every minute of what we're going to do outside. Maybe this is more for therapists, because therapists would be more the ones planning everything, right?
Right.
But even for parents, just going out and noticing. Like, how often do we go outdoors and we're walking the dog or going to the car or whatever? We're not actually stopping to notice anything. And if you just go outside with a child who is on your caseload or your own child, and your only agenda, right, is to notice nature, you just never know what you will find, what the child will experience, and how that will really positively impact your own mental health and well-being and that of your child. So that's another really simple thing. Just take the therapy session or some time with your child outside and go on a walk, and don't have an agenda. Just notice nature. So
Mhm.
notice if you hear birds chirping. Notice the leaves on the trees if they're changing colors, or maybe they're dropping in the fall, or maybe they're coming onto the trees in the spring, right? Um, those things can be really powerful, and I think we don't think frequently enough about how powerful a really simple thing of noticing can be. Kids nowadays they struggle with attention. We struggle with attention because of how
Right.
much we're on our phones and our screens. And just that aspect of noticing, I think, can really train our brains to kind of pay attention in a way that is difficult to kind of mimic in an indoor setting with the things we typically see indoors. Because outdoors, everything's always changing. Nature's always changing. There's always something new to see if you
Mhm.
just look for it. But you have to look for it, because it can be
Right.
easy to just not see it. Um, yeah, and then another way too would be to just bring almost the opposite, bring the natural things indoors. So in our sessions as therapists, one of the things I actually wrote into the rubric for the ConTiGO approach is that we try not to use plastic in our
Mm.
sessions outdoors with kids, because I think just nowadays we're so inundated with these non-natural materials that it can be very novel for kids to play with things that are wood or metal or fabric, because those are more natural kind of materials that we've had for forever, like, versus these manufactured kind of, plastic items that are like all around us in daily life now. And so something that we as therapists can do, or parents can bring those natural items into their home, so you can just as easily use like small pebbles for a fine motor manipulative in an OT session as you can like some kind of plastic bead or something that we might use. So just thinking about that too, like the materials that you use, I think can really bring a novelty to a child's play, what they're doing indoors as well. So that's sorry,
Yeah.
that was a lot of
Yeah,
a
no,
lot
I
of
mean, you
things, but
touched on so many things that I wanted to discuss. I'm just trying to process my thoughts here for a
yeah, yeah,
second
yeah.
because, yeah, so I feel like there is a difference between like just outdoor play and nature-based in that
Okay.
wording. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be a difference, but I think sometimes in people's minds, because I think naturally some people might think outdoor play, they think of like a playground equipment.
sure.
And
Yep.
and it can be that, but I think
Mhm.
nature-based is taking it an extra step, right? And really
Yeah.
incorporating the organic environment part of it.
Yeah, there's I don't know how deep we want to go into the research here, but there is some evidence out there that like a nature setting has a different impact on children's play than a playground does. So there was some really,
Mm,
again, seminal research that has been quoted lots of times. Um, Taylor and Kuo, I think, are the authors, but they did a lot of research in the 90s and early 2000s with children who had ADHD. And so they did a survey of like I think it was almost 500 families, parents, and what they found in that survey of what the parents reported about their children's behavior was that the natural settings, the nature settings, like going out on a nature walk or being in a park where there's a lot of greenery,
mhm,
the versus a built setting like a playground actually reduce their children's ADHD symptoms more than when they just played on a playground, when they played in that
mm,
built setting. Okay. So there
mhm,
there might be, and that's like very again, it was a survey, right? It's not an
mhm,
observational, actual randomized control trial or anything like that.
mhm.
But it does provide some tentative evidence that there might be some actual benefit to the nature spaces or the green spaces. There's loads of evidence about greening of like schoolyards and greening of urban neighborhoods contributing to the health of that community at
Yeah.
the school or in the neighborhood. So I think we can kind of extrapolate from that research that there might be some unique benefits to being in a nature setting for
Mhm,
therapy. And again, that's what I like to do in my approach. That's what I recommend, is trying to find a setting that you don't really see the built world. You don't see houses or cars or streets, because I think again, that's novel and it's rare nowadays that we are away. Urbanization is real, man. It is like spreading. So,
yeah.
it's almost impossible to get where you can't hear cars or other kind of noises or intrusions from the built world of our modern day lives. And so getting kids out in that natural setting kind of lets them settle into just being who they are and not feeling like they have all those, they're not reminded of all the stressors, of daily life. I think that works for us adults too when we kind of get out in nature. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's challenging because sometimes even if I like sometimes as a therapist, especially if you're working in a school, you may not
mhm,
have a space to go see a
right.
child in, or like so sometimes I would naturally be outside because there was no
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
otherwise, and but yet there's not a lot of natural elements available out there because they clean it up so that it's so
Yes.
sterile that there's
Yeah.
nothing really to find. So that's where I find it a little bit challenging. And so in that sense, I'm wondering, as a therapist, I often feel like I have like my set of equipment, right? Like things
Right.
that I buy or
Right.
suggest to other people. And a lot of those things are for indoors. If you had like two or three things that you would recommend or like equipment that's needed to make outdoor play a little bit
Mm,
more involved or like that, it's not naturally available,
yeah.
what would those things be?
Oh my gosh. Well, hmm.
Like your
I'm gonna
go-to two things.
yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and I mean, I don't know if you could do these in a school-based setting, but the things that I really feel like are, again, those novel things that are a little bit risky. Usually kids are um attracted to risk, right?
Mhm.
So I would say like knives. whittling. I would say
Okay.
fire starting, like things that kids do not really get to do in a normal daily life, kind of like parents aren't handing their kids matches for good reason. But in
Right.
the context of a therapy environment, when you can teach about fire safety, when you can teach that fine motor task of striking a match is so motivating. Even for the
Yeah.
kids who have the most challenges with fine motor skills, they want to light that match, you know?
Yeah.
So those are two things, like the knife use and fire starting are both things that I feel like for, for the old, maybe not for a 3-year-old, but for
Right.
5, 6, 7, 8, as they get the ability, the motor skill to be able to do that. And with whittling too, you can even use like a bar of soap and a peeler, a vegetable peeler. It can kind
Mm-hmm.
of, they can learn how to do the strokes with things that are a little safer to use than a knife. But
Right.
I think we often in current, I guess I should only speak for the US, but in the current kind of climate of parenting in the US, we completely underestimate what kids are capable of all the
Yeah.
time. And I frequently have to be like, in other countries, like people like kids are taking care of their siblings at the age that like we won't let a kid even touch a knife, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I think we need to really be aware of like what is the child actually capable of, and maybe give them things that are a little bit more inviting and exciting and kind of risky to them so that they engage a little more. um,
Right.
and I do think too those things need to be taught, like these are tools, this is not like a toy to play with. So maybe it's a little veering off of our topic of play
No, but
here,
it's okay.
but I do think really thinking about things that are novel and fun for kids, and those are the top two things that come to mind. I always say to nature-based therapists, like if you have a really bad day and like the session, just what you planned did not go well, like the kids were just off, like it was a full moon and everybody was in a bad mood, then the next week you do fire, you build a fire because everybody loves it. It's like
Right.
I've had some kids be afraid sometimes. Some kids are a little fearful, but that's also a great opportunity to teach them how to manage those emotions, right? So
Yeah.
those are the two things that come to mind, maybe not what you. Also,
No,
a,
no.
a
Go ahead.
Zoom ball is really fun too. Not a naturey thing, but just for an outdoor kind of fun thing to play with. The Zoom
Uh-huh.
balls, that they're like those strings that go, you pull the
Okay.
strings and then the ball goes over to the other person.
Got
That
it.
was something that came to mind thinking about playground play, like just a fun toy to have.
No, that's
But
awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I feel like it's the same even with little ones. It's like when introducing scissors, it's like every parent's
mhm.
just like, what they're supposed to be cutting by now. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and then even just like how you translate these skills into other skills like tying shoes or cutting their meat,
Yeah.
like I have a lot of parents that really like wait a long time before they introduce a knife at the dinner table. And I'm like, it's time. I mean, even
Yeah.
recently, something completely unrelated to therapy, but just in my condo development, it was like the
Mhm.
suggestion I said something about like, oh, the handles need to be lower on the trash so that, kids are able to open it. And they're like, why would kids be putting out the trash? And I'm like, that is so a normal thing for kids to be able to do. I'm like, this
Yes.
is not something that's reserved for teenagers.
Right.
And so I'm
Right.
like, why can't they throw out the trash? It's like not that
Yeah.
big of a deal. So yeah, I totally
That's such a
understand
great
that.
example of
Yeah,
how
yeah,
our
yeah.
society has just like this mentality that kids don't have to, they don't have to do any chores. They don't
And
have to do
right.
anything. Like we're
Nothing
not
that's going to
expecting them
challenge
to.
them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, that's actually a good segue to another question I was wondering is if there are any specific precautions that you would suggest to think about if you're starting to
Mm.
do things more outdoors.
Yeah, we worked through this early in my business to get like really clear behavioral policies in place, because when you're doing a group, the needs of the group really have to supersede the needs of any one individual child in that group, right? The safety
Hmm.
and the climate of the group is kind of the most important thing, really, so that
Hmm.
everyone can have a positive experience. And very quickly, we learned that children need to be able, for groups, okay, and this might kind of go for taking any kid outdoors, but they really need to be able to be safe in a wild nature environment without an adult within arm's reach at all times. That is kind of the language we use in our kind of behavior policy when people are registering, to help them understand that our groups are not staffed with one-to-one. Now, maybe if you have the ability to staff one-to-one, if you're just with a child as the therapist and the parent is there too, it might be okay, right? Because you can kind of,
Mhm.
it's one child versus many.
Right.
But for our groups, we definitely have to have that stipulation because it's for safety, really, for the kids, to protect and make sure that they stay safe, even in a wild nature environment. Um, other things I think are I really think it depends on whether you're doing groups or individual, though. I mean, that would
Okay.
really be the only thing, the safety of the child, making sure that the child can be safe outdoors. I suppose maybe something else too, if like a child had a tendency to like put things in their mouth,
Hmm.
either they're
Hmm.
developmentally at an age where they're still doing that, or maybe they're very, very young. You have to be careful about that because there are things outdoors that can make you very sick if you put them in your mouth, right?
Right.
Um, but other than that, gosh, I'm trying to think if there are other things that would like preclude you, like prevent a child from being outdoors. Allergies could be one, like having
Okay.
really, really severe allergies, or I know there's some disabilities where kids have like extreme photosensitivity to the sun. Like
Mm.
there are things you have to think about when you're outdoors that aren't as much of an issue when you're indoors. But I think naturally as a therapist or as a parent, you would know those things about your own child, and generally there are there are ways you can kind of work around those things to make it work. I really feel like almost anything you can do indoors, you can do outdoors with kids. And in a lot of cases, you can do it better. Like it, it offers a more like rich experience for kids.
Hmm.
But again, it does kind of depend on the goal and the needs of the individual child. So,
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, for me, I guess one of the precautions I have is more of like a barrier sometimes. Ironically, I live in South Florida. You would think
mhm.
that it would be great to be outdoors all
Yeah.
the time, but we deal with a lot of heat and humidity.
Uh huh.
And for me personally, that becomes a barrier because I don't regulate temperature very well.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids don't either when they're accustomed to being in air conditioning all the time. So I think
Right.
sometimes I'll take a kid out and then they're just like, we're staying out here. Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm just wondering in terms of like, just in terms of those little barriers that occur in
hmm
terms of the outdoor weather, how do
Yeah.
you handle those surprise situations or not so surprising situations?
Yeah, I think I know a nature-based practitioner who's in Florida, and I think the entire month of August she just does not have services. That's like her
Hmm.
planning time for her year because she's like it's just not comfortable for the
Yeah.
staff or for the children to be out there. And so it's a good example of how sometimes the outdoor environment is not the best, right? In those situations you might need to be indoors to get focus and attention to work on things that you need to work on with a child. So um, I would say though that this kind of goes back to us like coddling children a little bit and like not like really thinking about what are they actually capable of, right? Because
Hmm.
we need to think that for ourselves as well. So I'll share a little personal story to illustrate here. So I
Okay.
2 years ago I moved to Madison, Wisconsin because my husband's parents are in their 90s and we needed to be closer by to family to help them. And so I still run my practice in California. It's still functioning well. We still have our Zoom meetings, but I was very afraid of winter because I had lived in Miami, Florida for 4 years before that, and then I lived in California for 14 years. So for 18 years, I had not lived with any form of winter. If I experienced winter, it was like a day trip to Tahoe for a few hours and then I come home, right? So I was really afraid of winter, and one of the things that I had to do in my mind was to just really force myself to say like, okay, I'm going to embrace winter. I'm going to learn how to ski, I'm going to learn how to snowshoe, I'm going to get out in it, I'm going to get all the gear so that I like am well prepared, right, for the winter season. And the beautiful thing that happened is I've actually realized that my body is much more capable of handling a wide variety of weather than I thought I was capable of. And I think that's true for most of us. I think that's true for children too. Like we as parents and therapists need to be modeling for children that there's this saying in the nature-based education and therapy world, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. So if you prepare appropriately for the weather and you choose the activities that you are doing based on what is going on in the weather outdoors, um, then really there's a wide range of weather conditions that you can be out in and still be safe and still have fun and still play. And I would say that in my research, I actually had someone say, I interviewed nature-based pediatric occupational therapist, and one of the participants said something like, the kids don't care about the rain. Like they love the rain. They're not usually allowed to go out and play in the rain. Like parents aren't kicking their kids out of the house and going, go play it, go jump in the puddles. Like a lot of us did when we were young. And so
Right.
the kids actually, they're taking their read from us. So when we
Mm.
say, oh, this it's so hot, or oh my gosh, I'm so miserable, or oh my gosh, it's freezing cold, I don't want to go outside today, they hear
Mhm.
us say those things and we
Mhm.
model for them what their attitude needs to be towards the weather. So I would
Right.
just really encourage us as adults to kind of have a positive view of all different kinds of weather. And again, it goes back to that noticing, like noticing the beauty that happens in all different kinds of weather. And there was one other thing I was going to say here. I think for for me personally, like what I would say is like 10 degrees Fahrenheit to like maybe 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the that's the range, right? That you could be outside for a few hours for a therapy session. Now, anything above 90 or under 10 is like it's pretty serious to be outside for longer than a few minutes, even sometimes with wind chill here. Like it could be dangerous. And the same for
Yeah.
heat exhaustion over 90 or so. But I think if you choose your activities wisely too, like in cold weather, maybe you're moving more with the kids that you're with. And in hot weather, maybe you're doing a lot of water play. You're planning that
Mhm.
into your camp day as part of the therapeutic activities that you're going to be doing, or as a parent taking your kid out and obviously like going swimming,
Right,
during when
right.
it's really, really hot out. So I think we
Wow.
need to reframe what is actually good weather, right? Like, can we kind of widen our perspective of like what could be good weather to be outdoors in? So
I feel like such a lightweight. I mean, I do have a medical reason why, but I'm more like the 65 to 85, but it's
sure.
okay.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I joke in California. I was like, we used to joke. I mean, I would be at the gym. We used to have outdoor workouts during COVID, and I would joke like people, it would be like 60 and people would be like, it's so cold. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are so California. Like I grew up in the Midwest, like where it's like, if it's 60, you're wearing shorts and a tank top. So after winter, 60 feels really warm. Your
Yeah,
body adapts though. This is a
yeah,
key thing that I want to make sure we say here is that
yeah.
our bodies as humans, this is the big finding that came out of my research, is like this idea of nature-based therapy is really about braving real life challenges. So we hear a lot about this just right challenge, right? In sensory integration theory for OTs, and wanting to give children this like just right challenge where they're challenged just enough to make progress and kind of just be on their limit, but we don't want to tax them or stress them out too much because that could be detrimental. And I agree with that. I mean, I
Right.
want the child to have a positive experience in therapy, right? But what I found, like what all the therapists were saying in my research, was that nature is allowed to kind of give these real life challenges that are way
Mhm.
beyond what a therapist could do in an indoor setting. Like we wouldn't ethically be allowed to challenge a child with like a thunderstorm or something that might actually be scary a little bit, right? Or risky play where we're like climbing high up in a tree, right? Like in the indoor setting, it's harder to give that. Um, and so this idea of braving real life challenges brought up in my mind this concept of hormesis, which is it's in like the health world, people talk about it, but it's hormesis is this idea that our bodies have to have a little bit of stress in
Right.
order to adapt. So
Mhm.
things like, people swim in like ice cold water, or they take an ice cold shower, or we go in a sauna and it's really hot, or we fast. Fasting is a health practice that can be very beneficial. Given all of these things, you have to get, this is not medical advice, et
Yes.
cetera, all the disclaimers here, right? But generally, these are just examples of things that like cause this chain of like adaptive responses to happen inside of the human body. And that idea of hormesis was like, well, that's what we're seeing in nature-based therapy, is that nature gives these real life challenges And it forces the child to adapt in the moment. It forces the therapist to adapt in the moment in ways that maybe aren't as prevalent or as frequent in an indoor setting. And that is maybe what causes the nature-based therapy process to help children kind of grow that adaptive capacity to be able to face the future challenges that they're going to have in their daily lives. So it's kind of like the theory that came out of my research, but it relates to this idea of like braving the real life challenge of weather, right? And reframing our perception of being brave instead of being afraid of the weather. So just a little side note on the research there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that. That was one of my questions. I wanted to know what excited you in the process of doing all that research to earn the
Yeah.
PhD. So thank you for sharing that. So I
Yeah.
wanted you to share a little bit about what kind of programming you're doing with a therapy in the great outdoors that could be beneficial to therapists or even parents that are watching.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So the therapy in the great outdoors community, I didn't really talk about that at the beginning. I'm glad you mentioned it. So I have done business coaching for therapists for a while now, like probably 5 or 6 years. And I decided, like you said, to niche my business to nature-based practitioners only. And in the process of doing that, I realized I had a lot of things that I could share inside of a free community even, and not on the business coaching side. And so I created this membership community that is called Therapy in the Great Outdoors. And you can find it at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. That's kind of my website that lists all the stuff I have going on. But there's a free discussion forum. There's a jobs and volunteers board. There's a member directory so you can find other nature-based therapists near you. And that community is intended for PTs, OTs, speech therapists, mental health counselors, social workers, like anyone, play therapists, like anyone who is in the field of supporting children with disabilities and who would be interested in nature-based work. So my intention is to grow that to be like a robust place for like multidisciplinary kind of connections, right?
Mhm.
Right now, I don't really have the data off the top of my head, but I think it's mostly OTs just because I'm an OT and people
Yeah.
know me in the field of OT. And then inside that community as well, we have like some paid spaces that are really low cost, like $7 a month. And you get access to like some video trainings I've done and some treatment activities that we've crowdsourced from everyone in the community. And a few other like research studies and things like that that I've kind of compiled. It's like curated. I think it can get really overwhelming when you're looking for resources on Google, so there's kind of some curated resources in there for people interested in nature-based therapy with kids. And then my business coaching program is in there as well, but that's for like probably a teeny tiny majority of the people who are watching this, but it's for nature-based practitioners who want to like start and grow a nature-based therapy practice. So that's all available inside of the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think people will find that beneficial as well. I mean, even though like I'm an example of someone like even though you switched to that niche and I don't
Mhm.
necessarily practice that niche, I still find it beneficial to listen and
Mhm.
it's just to kind of get more information and just kind of hear your wise words. So
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I'm still listening. I'm still listening.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because
So
I mean, I do have the
oh
podcast
yes,
is
the
on that
podcast.
website too. Yeah, so I closed I kind of ended I intended to keep it going, but it just was too much to have one foot in and one foot out of
Yeah.
the general OT entrepreneur world. So it's still the Mind Your OT Business podcast is still up. I don't have any intentions of taking it down. There's 75 episodes there. And then I transitioned over to doing a podcast called Therapy in the Great Outdoors, the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy. So we talk a little bit about business, but it's also like synthesis of research and different interviews with people that are doing different kinds of nature-based work. So it's been really fun to do that. It's kind of like a combo of my two favorite things, like nature and business. So
Yeah.
it's been great.
Yeah, that comes across, and I feel like I said, I feel like I'm learning things that I didn't really wouldn't necessarily seek out.
Yeah, great.
But I'm happy to have it. Okay, so I want to ask you some fun questions. So this is
Okay,
what I call
fun.
our quick round, so you don't have to overthink them.
Okay,
So
great.
what would be your guilty pleasure?
Probably the first thing that comes to mind is custard, like frozen
Okay.
custard. Oh, so good. I love it.
Dessert is probably mine too, so
Yeah.
I understand. What would be your dream vacation?
Oh, Okay, the first thing that came to mind was Patagonia, but I don't know if I would even like to go.
Okay.
Something I it's hard because I haven't traveled much. It would be something it would definitely be something very outdoorsy, like in the mountains, like some kind of like backpacking expedition. So maybe Patagonia. I think Patagonia might be too cold, but let's just leave it at
That's
that.
like my nightmare vacation, but okay.
That's so funny. I do love the beach too, so maybe I should have said Tahiti or Bali or something. So Patagonia
Excellent.
and then to Bali for a vacation after I do the outdoor thing. That would be my dream, actually. There you go.
Nice combo. What would be a hidden talent that you have?
Um, a hidden talent. That is a hard one. The
It's
I
probably
I
some
don't even want to.
obvious thing like tying knots or something that it's so obvious to you.
What is my hidden talent? You know what my hidden talent is? I think my hidden talent is I I am unafraid to ask the questions that other people are maybe afraid to say that they have as a question. So I'm not afraid to
Mhm.
ask questions. I guess that's probably, I don't know if that's a hidden talent. That might be really obvious. But I do think that is something that I have as a talent is that I'm not afraid to say, like, hey, this was a mistake I made, or hey, what I don't understand this. Can you explain or whatever? So um I think the ability to ask good questions and not be afraid to admit that you don't have answers is a good thing to have in life as an entrepreneur or as a therapist in general. So I don't
You
know.
know
May
what?
not be hidden, but
I appreciate that because I'm always the person at conferences that has a question. And I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes people are like, oh, let's stop. And I'm like, question.
Yeah, right. Well, the speakers love you when you ask questions. I just want to say because that helps the presentation go well, right? So,
I guess
yeah.
being a speaker, I know that a little bit. So, but I'm
Yep.
mostly just curious. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious about what is your favorite game or toy? It could be current or from childhood.
Hmm. I had this toy when I was doing a lot of outdoor groups called the balloon ball. It's like
Okay.
a fabric. I don't even know if you can still buy them or where you would find them, but it's like a fabric ball that's probably about this big. I mean, it's like a little bigger than a beach ball.
Hmm.
And it comes with these gigantic balloons that you blow up inside of the fabric sheath. And the beauty of it is that it makes the balloon kind of like everybody as an OT has played balloon toss before, right? But
Hmm.
you know how the balloon doesn't have enough weight to it to really like have a good trajectory? The
Hmm.
weight of this balloon ball actually gave the big balloon, enough weight to play like we would play balloon ball volleyball, and we would like hang up
Okay.
a string across two
Uh-huh.
trees, and then the kids would have to bop it back to each other,
Oh, nice.
and they just loved it. It was such a great game. And then my other favorite toy is probably just ropes. Like if you're outdoors and you have a couple of ropes with you, there are just so many things you can do. You can play tug of war, you can make a spider web in trees and climb on it. You could hang it from a tree and make kind of an impromptu swing. There's just so many great things you can do with ropes. So I would always have like a few extra ropes in my backpack for any outdoor session. So
This is why I was saying it's probably your hidden talent is like making knots and stuff.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not very good at knots. I know a few, but not very many. I know the essentials.
All right, last one is what is your desired superpower?
My desired superpower.
Mhm.
This is going to sound not like a superpower, but maybe it is in today's world. I want to be able to listen more. Like
Hmm.
I think a lot of times I am chatty and I have my opinions. And so if I had any superpower, I think I would like to be really, really good at listening and seeking to understand people more than just like keeping my own opinion in my head. So I don't know if that's a traditional superhero answer. Is there a listening
It's
superhero? I don't
okay.
know. But that's just what comes to mind. Like it's something that's hard for me to do. And so to me, that would be a superpower to be like really attentive and listening. So
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're really good at that already, but I understand you want to be like super, super good at it. So
yeah, right.
wonderful. Okay, so we're coming to our close. Not that I don't have a million more questions that I could probably ask. But I wanted to give you an opportunity just to share like what is on the horizon for you and how can people get to know you, find more about you. Just repeat those for us if you haven't already mentioned them.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm probably most active on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook too, but Instagram I'm at Laura Park Fig is just my name, except not my whole last name because who knows how to spell Figueroa. And so Laura Park Fig, I'm on Instagram, and then on Facebook you can find Therapy in the Great Outdoors. There's just a page, but all my Instagram stuff is shared to that page too. You can go to therapists can go to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com for all the resources we mentioned here. Parents, if they want to find, we have just speaking about what's on the horizon. This is like we're at the horizon of this right now. It's not quite fully done, but I'm going to share it anyway because hopefully this will be on YouTube for a little bit, a few years at least. And we're just now creating the ConTiGO certified directory. So we have the official certification process in place. People have to take some quizzes to kind of prove that they have integrated the knowledge of the approach, to prove that they know the approach when they take the ConTiGO course. And then what we are just now getting started, if you go to contigocertified.com, it will kind of direct you to this site, is a directory where you can search for people that have taken the ConTiGO certification. And so that you, as a parent, you would just kind of know that this person has like invested in themselves and like
Mhm.
knows some of the evidence behind nature-based therapy and is using an evidence-based approach in their work with children outdoors. I'm really big about saying like nature-based therapy is not just outdoor play. Like the skill of a therapist, we've talked a little bit about that in this interview.
Mhm.
The skill of a therapist is really necessary for something to be called nature-based therapy, right? So
Mhm.
whether you're a PT, a speech therapist, an OT, you are your profession working in that nature setting. And so we want the ConTiGO approach to really be this kind of a seal of excellence, really, of therapists that have invested in learning and are committed to using that evidence and like taking their professional skill into the outdoor space in alignment with evidence. So that is there for families if they want to see if there's someone near them that is practicing and has been certified in the ConTiGO approach. So I think
Nice.
that's it.
Yeah, thank you for including that. I think I will make an effort also to include that even in the title of this video to like
Cool.
mention in addition to outdoor play, but nature-based therapy
Hmm.
is really what you're doing and what sets it apart. And
Yeah.
it's really important as well.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you.
today. I feel like this is really informative and helpful. Even the simple thing of the window, being in front of that window, it sounds so simple, but I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. So,
Right. Right.
and I think a lot of people are going to feel that way and find it helpful. So, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation. I could talk about this for days. So
Yes.
I loved it.
Me
Thank you,
too.
Amy.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share it. You can also head over to playapy.com where you can sign up for the monthly newsletter and receive discounts, news, and more. So I hope to see you over there. Until the next one, I hope you have a playful day.